Hi, I'm Michael Sorrell, and I am here tonight to welcome you to Deep Vellum Celebrates. Deep Vellum is a nonprofit independent publishing house and literary arts center. It was founded in 2013 by its current executive director, Will Evans. Deep Vellum publishes books and hosts literary events designed to foster conversation about critical topics. Its mission, quite simply, is to bring the world into conversation through literature. Deep Vellum has published over 100 books by authors from 50 different countries. It's hosting dozens of events in and about Dallas. But what Deep Vellum really is at its core, it's a place for storytellers. It's a place for people who are passionate about their country, about their subjects, about their city of Dallas. It's a place that's cool. It's where cool people tell cool stories. And let's be honest, all of us could use more and more places that focus on the good amongst us, that focus on our stories, the things that make us special. And Deep Vellum at its core tells the stories that make us special. Now, you may be asking yourself, why do stories matter? Why in this time, in this age, why do I need stories? Well, you need stories because they take us away. You need stories because they tie us to a place. A great writer has the ability to lift you from the moment that you are currently in and transport you into another time, another era, another place, and even another mind. That's a gift. Deep Vellum is a place for gifted storytellers to share their stories. Now, tonight, you're going to get an opportunity to understand just how special Deep Vellum is and just how special their storytellers happen to be. Tonight, we're going to learn about the stories that Deep Vellum tells and helps tell that impact this community. You're going to meet a great group of writers and literary leaders. And when you finish this evening, when you turn off your computer and go home, this is what I promise you. You will be moved. You will be changed. You will have had an evening that stays with you. And I'm excited for you. I'm excited for all of us. So I am going to get out of the way. I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to hand this off to the wonderful storytellers of Deep Vellum Books. Enjoy, take care, and have a wonderful evening.
Our first guest is Dallas-based writer, activist, and artist David Marquis. For decades, David has been at the forefront of building a more sustainable and more equitable community here in Dallas. Last year, Deep Vellum published David's timely essay on the connective and healing power of nature, entitled The River Always Wins: Water as a Metaphor for Hope and Progress. Tonight, we'll hear David read a passage from his book.
Rivers, ancient as days, may differ in the life along their banks, their depth, or the frequency of their flooding, but one thing is true. If enough drops flow together in the same direction long enough, the river always wins. There was a time in this country when women were not even allowed to vote, but the river won. There was a time in this country when Black people were enslaved because of the color of their skin, but the river won. Through many centuries, gay people had to live in the shadows and hide their true selves, but the river is winning on that issue and will continue to. If enough drops flow together in the same direction long enough, the river always wins. When we see water bubble up out of the ground and form the headwaters of a river, we think, that is where the river begins. But no, where did that water come from? From chapter 4, the headwaters. It is widely thought that the Venerable Rosa Parks and her refusal to give up her seat on the bus in Montgomery, Alabama in December of 1955 are the headwaters of the American Civil Rights Movement, but the headwaters of that river came long before. On the west coast of Africa, more than 400 years ago, there was a human being in chains, standing looking out onto water vast and distant, the Atlantic Ocean. They saw the ships, their sails, knew their purpose. Slave ships, ready. From somewhere within them rose up the words, "Oh, hell no," and then we will be free. And if not us, then our children, our children's children, the grandchildren of our grandchildren, we will be free. Oh, hell yes. The headwaters are within us. We are made of water. We are the drops that form the river that cut through the land all the way to the sea. And our land today, our culture, has become a hard-pan, hard-baked place. And we so badly need a long, slow, soul-soaking rain of goodness. I would like to take a moment now and tell you why I am here tonight. It is to express love and gratitude for Deep Vellum, for Will and Sarah and Lindsay, because they do the work of goodness. They make beautiful books about things that matter. But they also get us. They get writers and artists, and they provide us a place to gather, to nurture us and encourage us. When I moved to Dallas many years ago, in the mid-1970s, 45 years ago, I would tell people I'm a writer and a performing artist, and they would look at me as though I were from another galaxy. But I stayed. And I went on from there to do 9 one-man shows professionally, toured 40 of the 50 states, played the Kennedy Center at their invitation. Arco, Kodak, IBM, Bank of America have been my sponsors. But when I began my show, I Am a Teacher, which I know some of you have seen, went on to tour for 20 years, but I started in my neighbor's garage because I could not find a single place in this city to rehearse. So I am here tonight to say that I never again want any artist in Dallas, especially young artists from south of the river, because their neighbors might not have a garage. I never want any of them to have to begin their careers in their neighbor's garage. And now from chapter 12, to conclude, the greater water. And what do the drops learn from this? They learn to move with purpose toward goodness, and that their journey has been worth it, even the floods and the rapids and the drought. They learn that there is progress and hope in all things human, and that time is not an ultimate measure. The drops learn that the culmination of this long, arduous way is the knowledge that they are just getting started, that we are just getting started, and that we guide ourselves with the newest technology so that we can adjust our course, and also with our eye on the North Star, upon which guidance the ancients traveled. Thank you. Good night.
Next up is a trailer for the first play Deep Vellum will publish. Deep Vellum is honored to publish Penny Candy, a Confection, authored by celebrated local playwright Jonathan Norton, the current playwright in residence at the Dallas Theater Center. In this trailer, you'll learn some details behind the autobiographical play, which will be released in October of this year.
A candy house is a small business, typically in an African-American community. It's a candy store in someone's house. It's a gathering place. It's a place where the community can come to celebrate, to gossip, sometimes the de facto babysitter. And my mom was all too happy to babysit because she loved children.
What's unique about it is it tells a story about a particular community or particular demographic that most of the folks that I would bet that saw the play had never heard of.
My big impulse for writing Penny Candy was that big what if. What if there was, in fact, drugs involved in the candy house in some capacity. It sheds a light on a particular community that finds really creative ways to survive and to thrive and to care for each other, even if at times people might deem those ways of survival suspect.
It was a very pleasant slap in the face that goes, wow, I forgot about that.
I think one of the really cool things that people loved was just the nostalgia, because oftentimes, for African American audiences, we don't really have opportunities to kind of engage with our past in a fun, nostalgic kind of way. Working with Deep Vellum Publishing means that the play gets to return back to the page, and that it can be experienced by audiences all over the world, or something that, like, a 12-year-old is bored one afternoon and they're looking on their parents' bookcase and they find this thing called penny candy that seems intriguing in some way, and my world is introduced.
We'll leave Dallas for a moment to meet Peruvian writer Claudia Ulloa Donoso, whose book Little Bird, Deep Vellum will release this year. Here, Claudia and her translator Lily Meyer discuss the value of working with independent publishers like Deep Vellum. Welcome, Claudia and Lily.
My name is Claudia Ulloa Donoso. I'm a writer and I'm the author of the book Little Bird, that in Spanish is called Pajarito. Well, I can tell you a bit why it's important and special for me as an author to publish in an independent publishing house as Deep Vellum. I think the first word I would use here is the genuine interest for the literature and for also the author, and how Deep Vellum and all the other independent publishing house I published this book, Little Bird, has been publishing just independent publishing house in Spain and Latin America. It's how careful and how detailed is the work, and how close you come to both to the text, in this case to the translator, the relation between us and the publishing house. I don't know what would you like to add, Lily?
Oh, I think you're totally right. I think that, so I've been around the publishing industry for a while. This is my first translated book, but I've been working for years as a book critic. And before that, I worked in independent bookstores. So I've spent a lot of time watching the way different publishing houses operate. And it's so clear to me that indies like Deep Vellum are so careful with their books. They're so committed to their books. There's really a sense of community, it seems to me, when you publish with an independent press. And I especially think that indies like Deep Vellum that are so committed to publishing translated literature are just doing such an incredible favor to American readers in particular, because most of the big houses do not publish a lot of translation at all, and often don't publish translated books that weren't like huge in their original language. And so some of my favorite books, so many of my favorite books and books that have shown me new things about literature, I've read because of the bravery and commitment of indies like Deep Vellum. And it just feels so special to be part of that.
Yes, and I agree with you. And you said commitment and community. And that's exactly what I feel, it's more than a relation between a publishing house, like sitting in a table and say, okay, what we are going to do here. This is a community. I feel that I belong to this, not like there are someone here and I'm here, and maybe can come someone new in the picture in about 2 months, and then I'm all lost. I'm lost already when I write, so I wouldn't like to feel lost when I'm going to publish. And so yes, that sense of community and commitment, and to belong to to engage with what we are doing. I think it's very important.
Next on the stage, we'd like to welcome Deep Vellum founder and executive director Will Evans in conversation with journalist Lee Cullum. Will founded Deep Vellum in 2013 with limited publishing experience but big dreams. Today, Lee Cullum, who many of you will know for her years of incisive work as a journalist for media outlets across the country, will talk with Will about how the literary community in Dallas has grown since Deep Vellum's founding.
Hello, Will. You're the man of big dreams. That's what she said, and of course she's right. And your next big dream, as I understand it, is a real center for literature, a literary center. And you don't dream small dreams. I mean, you want a performing space. You want residency spaces for writers to live in and studios for them to work in. You want office space for nonprofits and WeWork spaces. What do you have in mind? I've sort of added up about 10,000 square feet in my mind, maybe 20,000. What are you going for?
You know, I was inspired to start Deep Vellum when I moved to Dallas in no small part because the motto of Dallas is big things happen here. And you can really do something with that mentality. And as I've started Deep Vellum and traveled around the world and collaborated with organizations in cities far and wide, I've seen this model that you just described exist in other cities and thrive in other cities. And it makes me come home to Dallas and wonder why we don't have a center for the literary arts the way that we have a wonderful performing arts center, a wonderful theater center, wonderful museums, galleries. We want to create a permanent home for the literary arts, to give people off the street, to give every member of the community a place to gather around the joy of storytelling. And I think that the idea of space, you know, Dallas is a real estate town as well. And we look forward to collaborating to find the right space, but also to really working and collaborating with as many groups and individuals as we can to make this thing happen, because it can't exist alone. It really is going to be the power of what we call literary Dallas coming together to make something, hopefully a profound change that will exist long past my time on this mortal coil.
Well, I know you went to Rochester and studied business for a while, and it sounds to me as if you have a capital campaign in mind. Is that right?
Yeah, I think this is the beginning of a capital campaign. It's a strange time to think big, but there's no time like crisis to start trying to, once you've figured out you can tread water, how do you get past this crisis and how do you avoid future crises and how do you build and learn from these experiences? You can learn from hard times and set yourself up for the future. And that's our plan for this year, is the fact that we feel like the city and Deep Vellum are primed to sort of lead the way and help make this happen. And eternally grateful for the experience I learned as a sort of apprenticeship under Chad Post at the University of Rochester with Open Letter Books. He guided my way to make me feel like I could start a publishing house. He really taught me what it takes to lead, to publish diverse books and to make an impact. And that really has inspired me a lot. And then I sort of adapted that model to what Dallas has and what it hasn't had before.
Well, you want Dallas to be truly a literary center in the country in the way that I've heard you say Seattle is a literary center. Iowa City is a literary center. Now, Iowa City, I'm guessing, is near the Iowa Writers Workshop. I may be wrong. What is it about Seattle? What's going on there that would make you call it literary?
That's a great question. You know, I will say in Iowa City, the Iowa Writers Program is sort of like the gold standard of American creative writing programs, but it really has fostered an entire community and an entire economy for literature in the city. And of course, they have a wonderful independent bookstore called Prairie Lights that helps provide the community space. So it's not just happening on campus, it's happening in Iowa City as well. That's really important for us, is to be able to bridge the academy with the community, with the literary world, and with your average reader in a way that we can serve as a go-between to foster the dialogue that it takes. Seattle was named a World City of Literature by the United Nations cultural arm called UNESCO. And, you know, they have some of the most extraordinary independent bookstores in the country up there. Our personal home away from home is called Elliott Bay. We have a relationship with a longtime bookseller there named Rick Simonson. But Elliott Bay excels, for example, in not just doing events at a bookstore, not just selling books, but in taking literary events to museums throughout the community. It's a lot like what the Dallas Museum of Art and their Arts and Letters Live series has pioneered here. And when that came to Dallas, that transformed the way that literature was performed in the city, like produced in the city. And they can't do it alone. And so we hope to be able to join up with them and collaborate and continue to find ways to reach readers. And of course, it goes without saying that the world's biggest bookseller is also headquartered in Seattle, and they have certainly transformed that city greatly, and the world of literature greatly. And it is in no small part Amazon's influence on the world. The way that we're able to reach readers is extraordinary, though it's interesting to partner with Amazon to get books to readers, as well as with independent booksellers who are really the lifeblood of what we do and provide a wonderful way to introduce smaller independent publishers like us to readers all around the world, in Iowa City and Seattle and in Dallas and in London and everywhere in between.
Of course, you want to get books to readers, and you have a bookstore yourself. It's online, it's in bricks and mortar. It's a for-profit bookstore. The question is, do you make any profit there?
Well, on any given day, that's an up and down scenario. It's been a very rough year for brick and mortar retail, as we all know. But this bookstore actually was sort of my pioneering model for what I thought a community center could be, right? It's technically a for-profit, but it operates as Deep Vellum Publishing's public face. This is a way to walk in off the street and to see our books on shelves, and not just our books, but really the books of our peers, because we don't exist in a vacuum. We exist as part of a thriving community of independent publishers, and we wanted to find a way to give space to those independent publishers in Dallas as well. The books that you might not find on the tables of larger bookstores, or on the when you're on the front page of Amazon or getting newsletters from Reese Witherspoon's book club. What are the books that are being left out of the conversation but are so extraordinary that they could change the world? And that's the publishers that inspired me to start all of this. I look at Milkweed Editions in Minneapolis, for example, $2 Radio in Columbus, Ohio. These are just a couple of other publishers that have recently started bookstores as well. It's a really intriguing way to get your work into your community, as well as support the work of the community that you're a part of. And that's what it's about. So we've hosted events in the store that are very similar to what we want to do in the Literary Arts Center. Not just selling books, but hosting spaces for spoken word poetry, for touring authors, for letter writing campaigns to members of Congress. We've done a little bit of everything here. And that has really given me a good sense of where we can go with a proper literary center, with the right resources and the right space, because the space is very, very small. And I think that we've outgrown this beautiful space here in Deep Vellum, but we've loved every second of being a member of this community that inspired the name of the company.
Yes, well, I know that you love Russian culture. You majored in Russian culture at Emory as an undergraduate, and also at Duke as a graduate student. You fell in love with Russia, and I think that probably extends maybe to music, but certainly to art, because I've noticed that your graphics tonight are right out of the Russian avant-garde, Malevich and Supremacism. You must have done that by design.
Indeed. That's a good chance to shout out Mark Perkins of Sullivan Perkins, who helped make that design. And then the front cover designs of a lot of our early books were inspired indeed by the Russian avant-garde, and those designs were provided by Anna Zelik, who is an invaluable member of the Deep Vellum family. And actually the Deep Vellum logo too, which is a special thing. It's this like little, it almost looks like a V or an open book or a shuttlecock. Mm-hmm. The two pieces of art that I sent to, actually 3 pieces of art I sent to the designer to make that logo was pictures of Fair Park with the Texas Art Deco, as well as a modern glass cube of a building at Duke that has Gothic flying buttresses, and then also the Russian avant-garde, like it's in a whole book of Russian avant-garde. And this logo came up, and it was like, oh my gosh, it's everything all at once. It was perfect.
Yeah, it seems to me that wonderful writing often comes out of distressed times and distressed places. I think about the American South in the first half of the 20th century, with the terrible reckoning that was going on with everything David Marquis was just talking about. I think that when migrants came to this country from India, they did some marvelous writing. And of course, Russia is bound to be crying out for expression now. I mean, the Navalny story is begging to be told. I think it's begging for opera. But I'm wondering, are you in touch with writers in Russia now who are turning out work that is expressing the anguish of that country now and the anguish of that people?
Yeah, I think you actually just expressed something really interesting about what we call literature, right? That's not an elitist term. Literature is a form of storytelling that makes it to the printed page, and publishing is a way to make that work public to the world. And this idea of hard times being a time of opportunity is something we've already touched on. And you're absolutely right that, like, when we started publishing translated literature, a lot of great books that we did are about conflict, either interpersonal conflict, or intergenerational conflict, international conflict. And then when we started publishing American authors alongside those translated books, it was not intentional, but a lot of the first books we signed, I think like 6 of our first 7, are writers writing in diaspora communities. Members whose parents or themselves were born in other countries who now write in English and who are as American as you and me. People, I mean, they're just extraordinary American authors, but who have a something blank American at the beginning. That's a really interesting, that's not what I expected, but it would make sense given the style of literature we're talking about. And what you just mentioned about Russia in particular, I actually had a Zoom call this morning with a new writer we had just signed named Alla Gorbunova, who is from St. Petersburg. And she just wrote an amazing novel in stories called It's the End of the World, My Love. And it is a book that is ostensibly about growing up in Russia in the 90s, which, when you talk about a really hard time, Russia in the 90s, in the post-Soviet era, was extraordinarily difficult life. But it's also effused with magic and the power of this book. I had 5 friends in Russia text me when they bought the book being like, this is the best book of the year. And just 3 nights ago, she won the Novel of the Year prize from one of the biggest literary prizes in Russia. She's a very young author. It's only her 2nd book. And through works like this act of friction, even if she's talking about the 90s, the way that you read it today makes it current. Literature for writers like Alla, for writers like Alisa Ganeva, whom we published from Russia, or Mikhail Shishkin, these are writers who are very politically and socially engaged, and they use literature as a way to sort of process the political and the social moment, this moment in history, and all writers do. If you choose to write a biography of Caesar right now in American history, you are writing it through the lens of where we are as a people. And when it is published in 2 years, it is going to be read through the lens of where we are as a people. And that's why literature is really important to have available for all time, to keep books in print so that we are able to visit and revisit works, because they change context, they change importance, they change meaning through time. There's very famous stories of this. Of course, Kafka and Moby Dick were not read in their lifetime. So many writers have died penniless and then go on to great fame and acclaim decades after their death. And we want to find as many writers as we can living now and works that are out of print to raise them up and to make sure that they're in print so that we can study them throughout time and throughout history.
Well, Will, I can't wait. I can't wait to come shopping at your bookstore. I can't wait to come to the center. So keep on going, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Lee. Thanks, everyone, for watching tonight. This is an honor.
Thank you, Lee and Will. Joining us next is Amy Stolls, the National Endowment for the Arts Director of Literary Arts. As the Director of Literary Arts, Amy oversees a variety of grants, fellowships, and national educational initiatives that celebrate and promote literature among community members across the country. Thank you for joining us, Amy.
Good evening, Dallas. And thank you, Will and Lindsay, and all the fine folks at Deep Vellum for inviting me to this space tonight. I'm joining you from up north in Washington, D.C., that sleepy little town where nothing much happens. Like my NEA colleagues in the visual arts and the performing arts and the media arts and other arts disciplines, I work with a team to, in broad strokes, help ensure that the arts thrive in our country, that our society values and has access to the arts from as many different voices and perspectives as possible, that money is not the only driving force of our country's artistic legacy, and that writers and artists from all walks of life continue to create and find an audience. And we do this in various ways. We oversee large national programs, we nurture partnerships with local, state, and other federal agencies, we do research, we do outreach, we showcase artists and raise all sorts of issues that need to be addressed about the arts and whatnot on our blog and our magazine and on our podcast. And you can find out more about all of this on the NEA's website, arts.gov, or find us on social media. But mostly, though, we award grants to the real superheroes of the arts world, nonprofit arts organizations around the country that are going that are doing the work in extraordinarily creative ways and in their own communities. As it happens, today was a big announcement day for us. We shared our first round of recommended awards for fiscal year 2021, totaling over $27 million. And in the literary arts, this includes over $1 million to more than 50 nonprofit presses and journals selected through quite a rigorous review process. Congratulations to Deep Vellum for being among our grant recipients. It's a good time to champion the literary arts. In this age of nonstop, off-the-cuff texts and tweets, literature, a powerful poem or a novel, a short story, a memoir, literature reminds us that there is beauty in our language, in the world, and in ourselves and in others. In this age of search engines and quick answers, it reminds us to feel that unique pleasure in wondering about what we don't know. Literature is an art form that is deeply rooted in place and history, is easily portable. It can be shared writ large or experienced in solitude. It's integral to other art forms we know, such as theater and film, though shines just as brightly direct to consumer. And we have scientific studies now to validate what many of us already know, that reading for pleasure reduces stress, heightens empathy, and makes us more active and aware citizens. When the world feels divisive and cruel, literature allows us, with our shared language, to enter the depths of anger, sadness, fear, and shame until we can't look away, and also of love so that it grows exponentially. In an age of fast-paced change, it teaches us to slow down and embrace silence. It can make us laugh. We all need to laugh every now and again. To share and preserve the truths that emerge from the hard-earned, written and spoken word, and to nurture a healthy dialogue among truly varied voices, those are the goals of those of us in the literary arts who do what we do. But who are we, and how many does that we encompass? And how do we fit into the larger world of the arts? Well, that last question is easier to answer than the first. The words are woven into the fabric of art and culture in so many obvious and subtle ways that there can be no denying the value of the literary arts in our society. We were telling stories before storytelling became a buzzword. And yet, some of us find ourselves waving our hands for attention sometimes when there are symphonies and theaters and large museums around town. I'm one of those people who finds words like infrastructure and ecosystem sexy. And to make any infrastructure or ecosystem work, you need a lot of people, from the local level on up to the national and international arenas. That's the we that I speak of, doing what we do. Writers, translators, editors, publishers, publicists, agents, printers, distributors, librarians, teachers and teaching artists, community organizers, book and website designers, book festival directors, interviewers, book reviewers, board members, bookstore owners and buyers and sellers, audiobook readers, and crazy uncles. You know, the uncles who send you their 700-page manuscripts of the great American novel, the book that's finally going to make them famous, but that makes you want to poke your eyes out by page 16. I have one of those. But thank God for them, right? Our crazy uncles are excited to write, and they read, and they talk about books and ideas, and we love them for it. All of these people and the organizations many of them work for, the presses and journals, the festivals and reading series and residencies, the service organizations and literary centers, the writers in the schools programs and podcasts, they are the unsung heroes of the literary arts world, each working hard to make a difference in their communities and together, collectively creating a literary culture and legacy. But there are known fault lines in the systems and structures that support the literary arts that need to be addressed. As we celebrate African American History Month, I'm continuing to think long and hard about the need for our field, like so many fields, to be equitable for BIPOC, immigrant, refugee, queer, trans, non-binary, and disabled peoples. To make any infrastructure or ecosystem work, in other words, is also to ensure that it never excludes or exploits. We need to be asking ourselves, who is and isn't writing? Who gets to decide which writers are paid less or paid more, and which writers are published and promoted? Whose voices are loudest when it comes to reading or banning books in schools? Who are and who should be the present and future leaders and builders of the literary arts, and what can we do to support them? And what haven't we thought of, and what do we need to act on now? As we start to emerge into a post-COVID-19 existence, we also need to be thinking about how, as a field, we can be more resilient, more financially viable, more adaptable. Nearly a year into the pandemic, the thought of building back better, as President Biden says, can be rather daunting. In publishing overall, book sales are down, editors are overwhelmed, printing and shipping are slow or unreliable, staff morale is low, and bookstore browsing and author visits have been hampered by bookstore closings and curbside pickups. And yet, like my colleagues at Deep Vellum, we're seeing organizations and individuals around the country rise up to meet the moment. Libraries and bookstores offering bicycle deliveries, hashtags illuminating truths about systemic racism, groups coming together to raise money for emergency funds, book festivals moving online and collaborating in ways that may not have been possible in pre-pandemic days, co-hosting events and sharing costs and cross-pollinating on promotion. Reading series reaching broader audiences online and featuring more diverse authors, workshops targeting first responders and presenters moving outdoors and into hospitals to meet audiences where they are now. The NEA's announcement today included not just grants to organizations, but also fellowships to 35 creative writers and 24 translators. Our fiscal year 2021 translation fellows will give us access to literature from around the globe, from Iraq to Togo, Pakistan to Romania, Ecuador to South Korea. There's a collection from the founder of Tibetan free verse poetry, a novel by a former Mexican ambassador, a prison memoir from a theater artist in Thailand, and a novel by the author Fang Fang from Wuhan, China, who last year chronicled her experiences with the pandemic and has received hundreds of death threats ever since. And I've just learned that two of our translation fellows who hail from Texas will be publishing their work with Deep Vellum. Sean Cotter, a professor at the University of Texas at Dallas, will tackle a humongous and important Romanian novel by an author that Will can tell you about because I'm too afraid to try and pronounce his name. And John Pluker from Houston, who will translate the novel Garbage by Mexican author Silvia Aguilar Zeleny. Since our translation program began in 1981, the NEA has supported over 460 translators and has helped bring to American audiences literature originating in 74 countries, 74 languages from 88 different countries. And increasingly, we're seeing projects to translate voices underrepresented in their countries of origin, Indigenous, female, and from the LGBT community. And we're so thankful that publishers like Deep Vellum help translated literature flourish. Our creative writing fellowships this year were in poetry, and the fellows together make up an incredible group. And they were selected from a pool of more than 1,600 applicants. Many of them identify with countries of origin outside of the United States: Mexican American, Lebanese American, Cuban, Vietnamese, Tunisian, Filipino, Salvadoran American. One poet, who is a person who stutters, has a voice that sings in verse. And many of them are parents who are exploring what it's like to raise children these days. Like Oliver de la Paz, who writes movingly of his son with autism. One of his poems is called Autism Screening Questionnaire, in which he offers poetic responses to typical questions on medical form. He writes, quote, "Does your child seem like he is in his own world? We mourn him daily, and yet he guides me by the hand through the threshold of his room as one guiding someone just off a train, gently and lightly, avoiding the gap between the platform and the track. I am thankful every day for guides as wise and driven as Oliver de la Paz and Will and Lindsay and the staff of Deep Vellum and all of the literary arts organizations around the country. Thank you for doing what you do."
Before we conclude, let's hear a final word from Deep Vellum Executive Director Will Evans.
First and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us tonight. All the readers, all the writers, all the translators, and for all of your support of Deep Vellum throughout the years. Over the past year, we have seen the impact of our literary work in our community as we gave voice to the world's greatest literary artists and connected them with readers, all while raising awareness around so many vital topics affecting readers and writers. We published 17 new books that address the most important issues we face as a global community today, and expanded event programming that created new spaces and new opportunities digitally in the midst of the pandemic for us to talk about these issues directly with readers. But our goal is to continue to harness the power of literature to make our community more interconnected and, while we're at it, to make Dallas a world-class literary destination. There are 3 ways we'll continue to meet these goals and increase our impact over the next few years. First, through our profoundly meaningful, rigorous, transformative publishing program. Next year, we'll publish over 30 books by debut and legendary writers alike. And that's not all. The books that we have on tap for 2021 and beyond get right to the heart of the most pressing issues facing us in the 21st century. For example, in September 2021, we will reissue the long out-of-print book, The Accommodation, a searing account of history of race and racism in Dallas, written by journalist Jim Schutz with a new foreword by Dallas County Commissioner John Wiley Price. And we'll host a series of events across the city to make sure this book affects change in our city. We hope this publishing project will give us the chance to elevate the stories of our city and our state by underrepresented writers of color as we move forward. We'll also publish Welcome to Midland, a debut volume of poetry by Dallas writer Logan Cure about her experience growing up queer in West Texas. In 2022, we'll publish the first in a new series called A People's History of Dallas, edited by Jerry Hawkins, the executive director of Dallas Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation, which will compile the work of many different Dallas writers addressing various themes in the city's history to bring light undertold stories of the city's history. This will be the first in a new series called The People's History, exploring those undertold stories of different cities across Texas. Alongside these and works by other Dallas writers, we're going to publish many works by other American and international writers exploring similarly crucial topics. The second topic that will help us make Dallas a world-class literary destination is by means of an important acquisition that transforms American literary publishing. You might have heard the news already. We have acquired the acclaimed nonprofit independent publishing house Dalkey Archive Press. Since 1984, Dalkey Archive has been committed to discovering, rediscovering, and publishing the work of the world's best writers and keeping their works in print. Dalkey Archive has published over 1,000 books, including the work of several Nobel Prize winners. So why does this matter for Dallas? Because we're bringing it all back to Dallas. Over the next 12 months, we will bring the operations of Dalkey Archive and all of its books to Dallas. We'll leverage the stature of the Dalkey Archive name and history to bring the world's best writers here to Dallas to interact directly with readers, setting up new programs like creative writing and translation workshops and classes. We're going to offer new things online in addition to in-person, and we'll continue to publish new Dalkey Archive books that will carry on the press's mission to redefine the possibilities of writing and to engage with the critical topics for all time. The 30-plus year legacy of Dalkey Archive will offer new opportunities for Dallas residents to interact with world-class writers and bring new global prestige to the city of Dallas as an outstanding literary destination. Finally, the third strategy for increasing our local impact is by dramatically expanding our literary event programming. For example, in 2021, we will open new book clubs that will connect underserved Dallas communities to the publishing community. We'll start literary programs for kids to coincide with our publishing of our first ever 2 kids' books. And if you've spoken with us recently, you know that we're working towards a huge goal for expanding literary programming in Dallas well into the future, to open Dallas's first literary arts center as a home for our publishing house, an event space, classrooms, writers' studios, bookstore, and more, all in one location. We believe that Dallas needs a place for readers, writers, and community members to convene around stories and storytelling. And if you're curious to look up other literary centers around the country that inspire our business model for what we hope to do in Dallas with this, check out the Center for Fiction in New York, Grub Street in Boston, or Open Book in Minneapolis. In 2021, we're going to begin our plans to build this center in earnest, first by expanding our current programming online, and then later this year, in person, stuff that we're going to be able to replicate in the Literary Center once it's built. And then second, we're going to be talking to Dallas leaders and Dallas readers to turn this vision into a concrete plan of action. With these 3 strategies in mind, we will continue to use literature to build bridges in our community and to make Dallas an ever stronger home for the literary arts. But we can't do it without you. Part of our reason for hosting tonight's event is to show how your support not only makes a difference for our organization, but also, more importantly, makes a difference in Dallas and beyond. Your support allows us to publish works of the highest artistic merit that will make meaningful impact in our society, some of the best books you're ever going to read, and to put on events that foster conversation around literature, around the world-changing power of reading and writing. If you'd like to contribute to learn more about our work or get to know us, please visit deepvellum.org or send me an email directly. I'd love to hear from you. will@deepvellum.org. We're so grateful to everyone in our literary Dallas community and our community around the world for providing the support that keeps Deep Vellum going. You make our work worthwhile and meaningful. We do this for you, and we can't do this without you. Thank you for your support. Look forward to reading together soon.